Welcome to the first 2026 edition of Risk and Return. I'm Charlie Gasparino from Fox Business, Fox News, and of course the New York Post with my partner in crime, the granddaddy of data, the one and only Bob Sloan of S3 Partners. We are here with a great show. But first, let's just chit-chat a little bit about the year was great. We started from zero. We're not at zero. We build up an interesting audience because, Bob, and our next guest will attest to this, we were so ahead of the curve on so many actionable trades and so many actionable, not just trades, but current events that led to actionable trades.
Happy New Year, my friend.
Yeah.
We had a really good run last year of being a couple of months early on crypto trends.
Pot.
Mark
Cahotis, the
emerging markets.
The hedge fund manager, is all over the place now because of the Trump EO, which he sort of foreshadowed. He said it was going to happen.
He totally did.
First. Legalizing it or making it more legal than it was, and it was right here first. Nvidia, you kind of nailed
all
some
over
of that stuff,
and still have a lot to talk about today about that.
Jim Chanos on
MicroStrategies,
and our next guest, Robert Koenigsberger. Did I say that name right?
You did.
I mean, it's I'm bad with names, but I practiced this one. And Robert from Gramercy
Fund Management,
really sort of foreshadowed the events of the past weekend. And what's fascinating about this, and we're going to bring Robert in a second. I'm going to give you. I mean, we all know that Trump, in his daring raid in Caracas, arrested Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan strongman, and his wife. And there's huge economic implications, there's huge market implications to all this. But a little funny note. So he does it. The shit hit the fan, so to speak.
Yeah.
Sunday morning Eastern time, like 1 a.m. Right. Yep. That night on Saturday, Trump was until 11 p.m. was at Mar-a-Lago at his table. He was with Doug Burgum, I believe, the Interior Secretary. He was with Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary. He was with Marco Rubio, who's a key point man in this whole stuff, what's going on in Venezuela. He's the Secretary of State, obviously. And he was spinning records, Aerosmith, blasting. I know this because a friend of mine was in the room with him. Trump was at his corner table. It was apparently in the garden room. I've never been to Mar-a-Lago. You've been there. And he was having a blast. And then like at 11 p.m., he just kind of, boom, gone. And then you know what happened next. And it's fascinating stuff.
You go from spinning records to a snatch and grab of a sovereign nation.
And establishing maybe a new world order, and something that investors should pay attention to. With that in mind, I want to bring in Robert. Robert, it's great to see you again. Kudos on what you said the last time. As I remember, you were talking about Venezuelan debt, I guess, kind of being a buy at 12 cents on a dollar. And what was the last trade of those bonds?
About 42 this afternoon. Good afternoon and Happy New Year to you both. Great to be with you.
Now that's a trade. Anyway, Bob, take it away. I want you to lead this one.
Well, as you were talking about the last time we had Robert on, which was August 22nd.
Yeah.
He was amazingly prescient about emerging markets generally, but specifically Venezuela. Robert, welcome back. It's great to have you back on. And we saw the events over the weekend and we just said, well, there's only really one person to call.
Yeah, I know.
It's Robert. We got to call him back because that was
amazing
show.
We actually re-aired on my X page that episode because it was so spot on.
It's so spot on. So we got to pick up where we left off. Just where are we? What does the Venezuelan political landscape look like to you today?
Great.
What do you?
Sorry. Thank you both for the for the kind words. And as I said before, every so often, even a blind squirrel finds the nut. So, with all joking aside, I mean, when we talked before, to us it was obvious that something was going to happen. We weren't sure exactly what it was going to be. So before the records were spinning on Saturday night, so to speak, what we were thinking about at Gramercy is, what will regime change look like in Venezuela? Will it be capital R regime change where you go from Maduro to Machado? Will it be small R change where you keep the regime in place and you go towards a transition? So let's talk about what happened and what didn't happen, and then we can talk about the implications if you want. What didn't happen is capital R regime change. As much as the markets might have liked it or Machado would have liked it, I think everybody's base case was that Maduro would be gone and Machado would be in.
Machado is the opposition leader who essentially won the election, as everybody thinks, or probably, and Maduro stole it from her, essentially.
Correct. Thanks for that. So Machado was actually this gentleman Gonzalez had to run because she was disallowed to run, but basically she was the shadow candidate behind Gonzalez. So I think many people's base case was if Maduro ever left, which was a big if, like it was a 10-1 odds on Polymarket the night before, right? Before they did pay out on the bet, so to speak. But highly, still doubted. But I think the base case was, well, when Maduro leaves, the opposition is going to come in. They won the election. It goes from Maduro. Machado gets the baton. And obviously, the choice that the Trump administration made was that the bridge from Maduro to Machado was just too big, right? That there was so much risk in that. And I'm happy to unpack that in a second.
Please do. Let's unpack that.
Yeah. So, but what did happen, and then I'll get into that. What did happen is simply small r. You had a decapitation and an extraction of the leader, but you left the structure in place, and that's really important when you think about going forward. Now, the question as to why was that the case? I think everyone was worried about, well, if the U.S. goes in and they take out Maduro, it's going to look like Iraq. It's going to look like you name whatever disaster there was in the past, and you're going to have boots on the ground forever, and we're going to be nation building and what have you. Well, when you leave the regime intact, you don't have to do all of that, necessarily, at least on the first day. They came in, they extracted, that guy's in Brooklyn. Now you leave the Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president, in place, and you move on. So with that in mind, when you think about Venezuela Friday night or Saturday night versus Venezuela today, the only difference is you've decapitated the top, but the structure is still there. And that has positive externalities in terms of less risk to move forward, but negative externalities that, a lot of the things that you were worried about before are still in place. Now, it seems to me that this is a government in transition. There had to be a massive amount of collaboration for there to be that little opposition to what happened. I mean, the operation itself, put all politics aside, the operation was awesome, right? To go in there, right, grab this guy, get out of town, no deaths. I mean, we used to have a term at my firm, like, let's not make any non-recoverable mistakes in markets. You can make mistakes, but don't make non-recoverable mistakes. We just call that a Maduro now. I mean, what a fool.
I mean,
right?
I look at it this way. Either they had a CIA officer in the Maduro cabinet, or this Delcy Rodriguez was essentially supplying Trump and the U.S. with information about exactly his whereabouts, how to minimize conflict with the Venezuelan armed forces, and how to extract them as fast as possible. That's what I get. I guess the question I have, and I guess a lot of investors, because there's plenty of investment opportunities here. I mean, there's investment opportunities to rebuild the oil infrastructure. It is a beautiful country before socialism came and destroyed it. I mean, it's got beaches. I mean, there could be hotels there. I mean, and they have other natural resources. Is that it seems like there was an old saying that Patton used to say this. They used to get on Patton's case for not denazifying Germany after World War II. And he would say, listen, being in the Nazi party was like, for a lot of people, you just had to be there. And if you just get rid of them all at once, no one's going to run the trains. The trains won't run. Everything will stop. The infrastructure will stop. So there's that. So there's two issues I think I have. Is it the infrastructure that they want to keep? And is the infrastructure mainly non-Maduro and non-socialist? Or is the infrastructure, making the trains run on time, all party loyalists, and you really do need this sort of like massive change here, because I can't tell. I mean, again, Iraq was the same thing. They got rid of all the Saddam loyalists. They got rid of everybody, and and by the way, people didn't know how to make the trains run on time, and they also the Saddam loyalists also became part of the resistance to the U.S. at the time. So can you kind of walk us through where we are with that?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack on that. And I'll start with the Iraq example because I think that's a good one. So I think Iraq shows you the potential for Venezuela today. I mean, when you think about when the Marines went into Iraq, they were doing about 1 million barrels of production per day. Today, they're doing about 5 million barrels. The GDP was about 25. It's 250. So it's 5 times larger in oil production, 10 times larger in GDP. That's the potential here, right? This is the largest proven reserves in the world that's only doing 1 million barrels a day. Even with Chavez, they were doing 3.5 million barrels a day. So there's a tremendous amount of potential. And just to put things in context, the Concorde used to fly to Caracas. The largest sales for Gulfstream in 2007 was Venezuela. So even during the Chavez era, another way of looking at the current state of production, despite everything that doesn't work in Venezuela today, despite all the sanctions, they're still doing 1 million barrels a day. So there's a tremendous amount of potential. And I think your reference to Iraq is a good one. There's positive examples that come from Iraq. And I think that's maybe why Delcy was left in power, because when you remove it, I also think it's why Chevron was there. Like, this 50 million barrels, it's ours, we're going to keep it. The Richard Nixon puppy speech, the checkered speech, it's mine and you can't have it. Right. This isn't about, that's the narrative. The narrative is, the reality is when you put an embargo, oil blockade in place, and the oil's still coming out of the ground and it's not leaving, you're about to have an environmental disaster. And so now I'm understanding why Chevron was, quote, permitted to go back. They weren't permitted to go back. They were told to go back because, in my opinion, this blockade was a big part of the strategy early on. And one of the negative externalities of the blockade was the potential for literally oil to be spilling in the sea and in the streets. So that's one. Your question on how low do you go in terms of total regime change? I think it's going to be an incremental process. It all depends. Nobody likes that answer, but we don't know how Delcy and the structure are going to behave until the head was removed, right? Once the head, the king is dead, long live the queen, right? So now we'll see, how Delcy behaves. I suspect that, one of the reasons that it took Maduro so long to leave, and one of the reasons that maybe he didn't leave voluntarily, is he couldn't. He was almost held hostage at the top of this structure. So the way that everyone behaves, and you can see the way that people behave in the street, you're not seeing celebrations in the street because the same colectivos and
locked it down, right?
The street terrorists, if you will, are still there. But I suspect it's going to be incremental. And I bet part of the deal that was made with the structure is we're going to move towards this transition. If you behave, you'll get the immunity that you wanted. And if you don't, you'll get the treatment that Maduro got. So it's the carrots and the sticks. And
do we know where the military, I'm sorry, do we know where the military sits in all this? Are they capitalists? I mean, are they hardline communists?
They're definitely capitalist, right?
See, that's where this gets interesting. That's where this gets interesting.
And this is a kleptocracy, right? That's really what this is. But that's a form of capitalism. And this whole structure is about how do you divide and conquer the spoils that are there? And certainly the military is a big part of it. The Cubans were part of it. The Russians were part of it. The Chinese are part of it, right? So there's been a change in the state of nature in that the top has been removed. But I suspect, the plan is to move Delcy and the structure towards a transition. And where I was going before is Latin America has examples of these dictatorial regimes that go from a dictatorship to an election, lose that election, but still got their immunity, and were able to come back politically in the future. So think about Daniel Ortega
yes,
in Nicaragua, right? So a dictator, a big bad dictator for 10 years in the 1980s, has an election with Chamorro in the 90s, loses, comes back, still in control today. But like the FMLN in El Salvador, elements of Colombia, they were able to stay out of jail, lose an election, and come back and survive. And I think that's a reasonable base case for the Chavistas to think about today.
Well, that's an interesting question, which is, do the Venezuelans actually hold elections in the near term? And the second thing is, going back to, Charlie, your example of Iraq, and Robert, you're talking about the expansion of GDP. How long does it take for this oil to go from 1 million barrels a day to, draw me a picture, X? And what's the time frame, low and high, and how long does it take?
So look, I do think elections are going to occur. I mean, I think the base case is, and the expectation is that this is a government in transition, and incrementally we're going to move towards elections. I can't see a world where the Trump administration says, you know what, it's cool to go from one dictator to another, and so there at least has to be the facade of elections, and I would think that that's going to occur in 12 to 18 months. I would think of this as if Maduro had left on his own voluntarily, and the structure had been left in place, there would have been a negotiation about a transition towards something, and that transition would be anchored in an election. So I would guess, in the coming days, weeks, there'll be discussions about that. Now, you can't just simply have an election, put the new candidate and expect to have success. Charlie used the word earlier, this place has been destroyed, right? So what does that mean? The state has been destroyed. They need to rebuild the institutions that have been destroyed. There are no courts, right? There's no there's really no executive branch. There's no legislative branch. There's no judicial branch. So all that has to be put back into place. There needs to be a new constitution, a new electoral commission. Outsiders need to come in and monitor that election. Again, that happened in Nicaragua. The UN was there, what have you. But all that takes time. So, Bob, yeah, I do think there'll be elections 12 to 18 months. This incremental, as Delcy and the gang behave towards elections. Remember, that was the deal before with the Biden administration. Have elections. We'll rip off the sanction bandage, and you guys have elections in kumbaya. Well, they didn't adhere. I suspect this time Delcy and gang will adhere, because if they don't, they'll see the stick and they'll be in Brooklyn with their former boss.
Is it possible? And yes, that's a big stick, obviously. And is it possible that Trump has sort of, people are sitting here saying, oh, he has these grand ambitions for, this great, democracy down there, that he actually cares about some limited things here. He actually doesn't care who runs it, as long as there's some semblance, as you said, of fair elections. He doesn't care who's running it, as long as the Chinese and the Russians are kind of not, poking their nose in our tent, which he considers this hemisphere part of our tent. And he doesn't care who runs it, as long as U.S. business interests can operate unimpeded in a way where they're not going to be nationalized. And if you're a hardline commie and you give him all those three things, is it possible he just doesn't care?
Yeah, I think look, I remember Pompeo when he was Secretary of State. And when he was talking to the Chavistas, he did this video in Caracas, and he said, look, if there's elections, and as you say, the commies win, I'll call them the Chavistas. If the Chavistas win a fair election, the U.S. will honor that, right? So you could see a world, and let's just say Delcy runs or someone else from the Chavistas run, and it's deemed to be a fair election. Yeah, I agree with you. I think the U.S. could live with that. Do I think that that's the base case, that if there were fair elections and real candidates can run and not be intimidated and what have you, that the Chavistas would win? Probably not. But what is this about? And I think we talked about this in August.
Yeah.
Which answers your question. This is, in my opinion, the world's gone from a very unique short period of globalization, 35, 40 years after the wall fell, to going back to what we all grew up with, which is regionalization and spheres of influence. And in spheres of influence, I care about what's in my backyard more than I care about what's in your backyard. So I don't think it's silly to think that, in Alaska, when Trump and Putin were there was some implicit deal that, you get out of the Americas, leave Venezuela, kind of do what you want with Ukraine within reason. But we're moving to a world of spheres of influence. This is about, and this has been the most used term in the last 72 hours, the Monroe Doctrine. But remember, we talked about it in August, right? This is about
before anybody else was talking about it.
Yeah.
America taking back the Americas for America. That's what it's about, Charlie. I think that's what you're describing with, does Trump care if X, Y, or Z happens? So what has been the challenge in the Americas? Venezuela, like, it's been the roach motel for all the bad cockroaches. The Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, Hezbollah, what have you. So if you go and they say you can check in, but you can't check out, but I think they just created a mechanism to check out over the weekend. So it all starts there, right? And so if you can protect the Monroe Doctrine, the the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine that we'll use military force from time to time to protect our interests, you have recreated America for the Americans.
And just let me make this one point, but that is good for business because it brings some certainty for investment, doesn't it? To a certain extent.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you want to think about just Venezuela alone, and then this will kind of help transition back to where Bob was, like, how do you get oil production to where it's supposed to be, right? Well, you need to normalize relations, right? You need to normalize the political system. You need to create property rights. You need to honor property rights in the past that have been stolen, right? Whether that's returning properties or more typically paying off the claims related to those properties. And then you need to restructure the former debt, because that's typically the stepping stone to coming back to the capital markets. Because if you're going to have FDI and Chevrons and Halliburtons and Schlumbergers, you're going to need working capital for all that. That's going to have to come from debt. So what does that mean? You need a new debt stack with a new risk-free rate that's as low as possible to foster that investment.
And what does it mean for the other countries in the region? Expand that. You know, if you're sitting in Cuba, run us down.
Colombia.
Yeah,
what does it mean?
It amplifies what it meant when Donald Trump came into office. It meant there's winners and losers, right? That if you're with us, you're with us, and if you're not, F around and find out, right? So there's this bifurcation between, like, Ecuador, El Salvador has been a winner since day one, right? Ecuador has been a winner. Argentina's a winner, right? If you're all about an alliance, I mean, the smartest thing Milei ever did was walk into DC with the chainsaw and hand it to the Trump administration, right? That like solidified it. And when their backs were up against the wall, Besant said, "We'll do whatever it takes," right? The flip side is, if you're Petro in Colombia and you're Lula in Brazil, I'll say Mexico's in the middle because there's a lot of narrative around Mexico, but I still think Mexico's, a benefactor of being this close to the U.S. But I guess it's a long-winded way of saying you can't treat all of Latin America the same. I believe there's a move towards the right in Latin America. This probably only accelerates it. You've seen it in Chile, you've seen it in Argentina, you've seen it in Ecuador, you've seen it in Honduras. So, and this is the way it's been historically, right? You had a bunch of military regimes in the 70s, you had fledgling democracies in the 80s. You have, they were right-oriented, then they were left-oriented. These things all tend to go together.
By the way, I'm encouraging our viewers to chime in if you want, ask a question or two. No, it's no problem. We'll read it we'll read it to Bob. So I guess the big thing is, where does the investor go now? I mean, where would you be looking at?
Just generally in Latin America?
Yeah.
Well, I think, but put a finer point on it. You were in August, the bonds you were talking about, the National Oil Company was trading at 14 cents. I think the last print was like 42 or 43 cents.
I mean,
do you think as oil comes online and all these things have to happen in terms of access to capital markets and elections and infrastructure, and you got all these different things that have to line up, do investors get behind it and go, you know what, 60 cents on the dollar? What is there any way to value this going forward and saying, yeah, these bonds are money good?
Well, there's a difference between money good and more value. And the way I think about it, something is distressed if it trades below a value or restructuring value that you think you can achieve. So something that trades at from 100 to 60 isn't necessarily distressed if it's worth 20. But I do believe that Venezuelan bonds could certainly be worth more than 40. But let's be honest, it's not asymmetric the way it was when we were talking about it in August, right? But what happened over the weekend, I think the right tail is thicker than it was, fatter than it was, because one, the transition's safer. It wasn't just hand the keys to Machado and see what happens. There's not boots on the ground. But the U.S. is around, right? The U.S. is staying around the hoop. And, if the U.S. stays around the hoop and you get Besant and Trump saying things like, we'll do whatever it takes, that means that you should expect a lower discount rate, higher oil production. So what drives debt sustainability? GDP. What drives GDP? Oil production. So if oil production's up and stability remains, maybe what have been a 15% discount rate on a bond might be 9 or 10. So that's where the upside's coming from. It's not the easy money, But look, the easy money in Argentina last year was from 30 to 60, but there was still money to be made from 60 to 80.
The other thing that's scary is that this all can change on a dime with a Democratic administration. I mean, you're right. Then the Monroe Doctrine goes out the window, and who knows? I mean, don't you think it's a little bit? It's still kind of dicey. Although are we kind of like in this thing now where whoever, even if it was Kamala Harris who came back from whatever and became the next president, that she might have to continue what Trump is doing in our hemisphere.
Look, I mean, I think the spirit of the Monroe Doctrine is not necessarily only a Republican, doctrine.
Right.
Actually, I think that Trump did the hard work for both sides. So I think it would be, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that if the Democrats come in 28, that all of a sudden they go, oh no, we're just kidding. Hey, let this guy out of Brooklyn, let him go back and run. He's a political prisoner. Where I thought you were going, Charlie, is everyone's been talking about the right tail in Venezuela for the last 72 hours. All the great things have happened, all the great things that can happen. But, what are some of the challenges? I mean, one, I talked to you about the state's completely destroyed and has to be recreated. Everything above the ground has been destroyed economically. That's the bad news. The good news is most of the values under the ground. But we have this government in transition, and it could collapse. I'm not saying it will, but the left tail risk here is, you mentioned the military. That this is a coalition of many forces. This government, and we haven't seen infighting that everybody thought you'd see. Well, you might, right? And if that led to the collapse of Delcy Rodriguez's government, you're certainly going to see some volatility around these bonds. So, Bob, as much as I'd like to say, hey, that 40 could be worth 50, 60, 70, I think the opportunity in Venezuela today may be around the volatility and trading the volatility, plan the trade and trade the plan. Up at 48, down at 32.
And people forget, Venezuela exported a lot of its poor to the U.S. in particular, but a huge swaths of its entrepreneurial class left. I mean, I was blown away when I was in Madrid over in the summer, just how many rich Venezuelans live there, and entrepreneurial Venezuelans are in Spain right now. So, and do they want to go back? I mean, so there's a hollowing out of that sort of that we take for granted here. I mean, we have the entrepreneurial class that wants to stay in the United States. They may not like to stay in New York City with Zohran Mamdani, but they'll move to Florida. They'll still be entrepreneurs. You don't really have that over there, I think. Well, maybe not as much as maybe they return. I mean, I don't know. What's your sense on that?
So history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And I do think there are some positive examples of reverse brain drain. So, and what comes to mind at the moment is like Peru. And if you think about Peru in the 1980s, it was a disaster. It was a broken state.
Shining Path,
Alan Garcia, and tremendous amount of brain drain. A lot of really well-off, smart Peruvians left. But you know what happened when Fujimori came? They came back.
Yeah,
right? A lot of them. And they became the basic building blocks for grocery stores and banks and insurance companies. And if you look at maybe some of the top families in Peru today, they weren't in Peru in 1988, but they are today.
Does it concern you at all that we look like we're dividing the world up into three spheres of influence? And it seems like Trump's okay, and it has like implications. China, you take your part, we're going to take our part, and Russia, you got to have Europe because that's a basket case anyway, and they can't defend themselves. And Trump might be okay with that. Is that just me being overly simplistic?
I mean, are we just going back to? Are we going back to? Are we mean reverting? Right? Like maybe this period of globalization was unique in history, and we're going back to where we were. That's kind of my thought, my fear. What are the negative externalities that come from that? Globalization has gone to regionalization, and with regionalization comes spheres of influence. One of the things that we all learned in COVID is that we had to go from just in time to just in case. We had too much dependency on globalization. So I think part of this regionalization is everyone's realizing that, if that were to happen again, whatever the factor is, we need to be better prepared for just in case than we were last time.
Although, it makes me think that we've just given the green light to China on Taiwan to take Taiwan. However, the lift on taking over Taiwan, I don't care how strong the Chinese military is a lot heavier than this one. I mean, the Taiwanese are armed to the teeth. You're going to have to mount the naval invasion. I mean, I guess you can nuke them, but then why would you try to take them off over if you're going to nuke them?
But Charlie, maybe thinking regionally instead of globally. Everyone wants to compare everything to Vietnam, right? But like Taiwan might be our Vietnam. Like maybe when you think about it from a regional perspective, like I'm unfortunately of the opinion that Taiwan may be about not if but when, and I just hope it's way back, a long time from now. But that just may be, in a world of regionalization, it just may be hard to avoid.
Maybe Trump is okay with that. I mean, he's only got 3 more years, so I mean, who knows?
Whether we're okay with it or not, we have to prepare for it. That has to be the base case, right? That's like Venezuela. Everyone's oil. Well, Venezuela has a tremendous amount of rare earths, right? Like whether we like it or not, like the chip production that's in Taiwan, we're already figuring out how to rewire the world for chip production, right? That has to be the base case. You hope for better, but you got to have a base case that prepares you for the worst.
How does that affect any investments in Taiwan? I mean, is anybody preparing us? Do we see anything in prices of any of the securities related, or is this just us talking?
I mean, I think it's a tail risk. It's not really well priced in the market, and even you could see China. Like last time we talked about the investability of China, I said to be careful when everybody says something's uninvestable. That's when you should invest in it, because that's when the technicals are cleaned up. It's a tail risk. I don't think it's well priced, and quite frankly, whether you short something, and if this happens, right, doesn't matter whether you short Taiwan or you short the S&P. It's all going down for a while, right?
But I got to tell you though, invading an island that is mountainous terrain,
not easy.
Look, I'm no military strategist, but you'd mentioned Vietnam. You have a very large military that really hasn't been tested. The politics are very dense and very opaque to us, somewhat. You want to move your entire career, you're going to risk on something that large and do it the first time and do it correctly. I would probably bet against that.
Yeah.
I would bet against that.
The challenge that the Chinese have is they still have a dependency on the world, right? So the thing that we learned about, I don't think the Chinese could sustain the sanctions environment that the Russians have sustained. I think they have too much interdependency on trade in the world and what have you. So that's probably the where you can get some confidence that maybe something bad won't happen.
Robert, this was fantastic. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for your time. We went a little over, but it was such a great conversation. We couldn't help ourselves. We thank you for your time.
And your knowledge. And we'll come back in a couple of months and see how many boxes did Robert check
we're
off.
not keeping score that way because we know he's going to be right.
Well, we know it's going to be all of them. That's the whole thing. But so we'll brag about it.
Really nice to be with you guys today. Happy New Year and all the best.
You too, Robert. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, that was amazing.
Only here.
You going to buy some bonds, Venezuelan bonds?
I'm going to leave that to him. I think what he said.
How do you buy a Venezuelan bond? Can you go to a broker? Well, you know all the guys on the street.
Sure. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways you can access things.
I can't get it through Vanguard. You're saying?
Answer is I don't know, but I think probably not. But you have to be a considerable investor to do that and get that kind of exposure. But there's probably ETFs. There's probably thematic baskets around that can give you like exposure to it.
Yeah.
That's probably homework for next show.
Yeah.
Or we'll drop a tweet on X.
Any actionable stuff, Bob?
Well,
or ideas?
Not for the beginning of the year. We don't have anything this week. But there's been so much going on.
Oh God.
It's been hourly, right, with what's going on. And just all the updates with Venezuela, and no one really has a map.
Right.
For actually when someone makes that big a move.
By the way, there's two, I think, big macro trades out there right now. One is clearly anything related to Venezuela, right?
Yeah.
And Bob was perfect with that. The other macro trade, I mean, it doesn't have the sort of, global importance. It involves Warner Brothers Discovery. I've been told by multiple people on trading desks that this is the arb of the century, this thing, trying to figure out who's going to win this and weighing all the odds. Again, it's coming down to two players.
Now, you wrote about Verisant, right? I think that's how you call
it's
it, right?
all these crazy...
And the IPO that's now down
but let's just unpack this a little bit. So Warner Brothers keeps saying it likes the Netflix deal.
Yep.
The Netflix deal is priced in a funky way. It's $27.75 a share, cash stock, and it pushes the value above the $30 all cash that Paramount Skydance is offering by adding in something called the equity stub, which is the spinoff of its cable properties planned for sometime later this year. That's CNN, Discovery, TNT. They think they can get at least $3 a share. Now, the people at Paramount Skydance, the Ellisons, Larry, David Ellison is the independent movie producer. Larry is the famed co-founder of Oracle, and Redbird Capital, run by a really smart investment banker named Jerry Cardinale, who knows balance sheets and math better than anybody. They say, nah. With all due respect, this new spinoff has got $15 billion of debt. Look at the comparable. The comparable is what happened earlier this week in Versant. Versant's a new company created by Comcast, the spinoff of its cable companies, right? And
which is MSNBC,
CNBC,
sorry, CNBC,
with almost no debt,
right?
Negligible,
right?
And it's tanking every day. It was down last I looked, it was down another 7%, I'm sure. I mean, it's been down like 20+% since they came public. And, I talked to Mario Gabelli.
So now there's a mark on.
Well, I talked to Mario Gabelli.
Right? There's a public mark on it.
Mario Gabelli said there's a lot of technical factors in the sell, but he doesn't like the Netflix deal because it's too complicated, too much cash and stock. And I think everybody and their uncle is trying to bet on this. Will investors, there's a tender date that Paramount Skydance set. I think it's January 21 for investors to, join, basically vote their shares to them. Yep. Whether they do that or not, I can't tell you. But, the Paramount Skydance people say, the numbers just don't add up. Now, on the other hand, Warner Bros. Discovery has put out a press release today saying they're rejecting their latest sweetened offer, which wasn't more money, but the different terms, like Larry Ellison back in the equity with his own personal fortune of $240 billion. They're saying, listen, you're back in the equity. You got to raise $85 billion in debt to do this. Your current company, Paramount Skydance, has got a $15 billion market cap. Yes, you got the old man's money, but this is essentially a leveraged buyout.
Right.
And, we don't, this is where, suppose you don't get the debt. Suppose they turn around, the banks, and there's two banks involved. It's Citigroup and Bank of America. Suppose they say, nah, we don't like the cable business. You're buying the whole thing.
Right. Okay.
Netflix is guaranteeing everything, apparently, with its balance sheet. The Paramount Skydance people are saying, no. This is, are you really saying that Bank of America and Citigroup are going to back out of their debt financing? We have agreements. Right. They're locked in. As locked in as they could be. There's something known as the Revlon rule. You've heard of that. It's, if you do an M&A transaction, it's enforced by the Chancery Court in Delaware. You have to do something that's shareholder friendly. This is so much more shareholder friendly. And not only that, you're not going to get your deal through the Justice Department. Right. You are literally laying, and the Trump Justice Department is, and this is where they're on very firm ground, I believe, very focused on streaming as a monopolist and a monopoly on streaming, because so many people are getting their entertainment, sports, and news, even news product from streaming platforms. And Netflix will be combining, if it wins this deal, the number 3 streamer in HBO Max with the number 1, their own. And so, if I was a betting man, knowing what I know from the Trump administration, I think there's low odds this Netflix gets through. Now, everybody seems to think that Ted Sarandos kissed up with Trump, and they
figured it out, right?
But Netflix, just from a political standpoint, if you look at their programming, it's so non-MAGA.
Well, they certainly have.
They have some like
one or more ex-presidents on the payroll, right? So
don't they have like
Obama has
Obama?
A massive deal with
that. I mean, like maybe Melania is going to get something with Netflix. I keep hearing that, but I like Netflix, and there is conservative programming theoretically on there. There's also a lot of crazy stuff. They have a movie about a transsexual coal miner. I'm just telling you, if you're talking about a sort of cultural curveball,
I'm just going to go to why everybody's shorting the longer dated bond ETF TLT.
And I just
you went to a different part of the alphabet on me.
By the way, all these factors I mentioned is what the trading community on every major desk is dealing with right now, because they call me and ask me, and I say, hey, listen to Risk and Return.
Well, if you would listen in August, first of all, one of the things that we should tell our viewers is that you have a lot of company. Our viewership is, and we get a couple 100,000 views, but more importantly, the listeners is between 40 and 60,000 every week.
I know we're starting to break through.
We're starting to break through in terms of a meaningful audience, and it's because we do in this hour talk about a lot. It's a very content-rich show, and
we do,
and we have a little fun along the way.
We have some fun, and we do our homework. I mean, if you follow the WBD saga, I mean, let's be real clear.
It was $19 when you first started talking about it.
I think it was lower than that.
Right?
I think it was lower than that.
Okay.
And I think it was 12. And here was the interesting thing. So, Wall Street Journal breaks the story that Ellison is interested in it. Right? They didn't have the price. They said he was going to be an all-cash bid. I came out the next day and said, it's not just them. There's going to be a bidding war for this. And that bidding war pushed it to where we are now, which is, potential. It's probably going to go to 30. Right. I mean, at least if depending on how you map out these things. I know the stock is trading at 28, but think about that. If you follow, and I was on the air with us right after I broke that story, like immediately.
Yep.
I remember I broke for the Post, and I came right on here, and we spoke about it. And so if you follow that, you made some bucks. Now I wasn't trying to make bucks. I was just giving you the news.
Good reporting, right?
But that's what reporters do. They try to give you the information, and you do what
you
want.
Do with it what you want to do with it. We've seen a couple things in the past couple weeks, Charlie, that actually got our attention here at S3. Number one, I just talked about it. The ETF TLT, which is the long bond ETF.
Yeah.
The 3-month short interest change is up 18%. Now, why is that important? It's important because retail is a real phenomenon in these markets. Now, it's not the meme stock thing. It's much more prevalent. The technology, Robinhood, Webull, et cetera, all these handheld devices has really, it's matured. And retail is a real presence. And one of the things that retail does in high net worth, not even high net worth, in wealth management period, is you have an allocation. You have 60% equity. This is the traditional model. You have 60% equity, you have 40% bonds.
I mean, we're delineating retail here. We're not talking about the meme retail.
No. I'm talking about just the
rich people that have money.
Not even rich people, just the mass affluent.
Yeah, the mass affluent.
And so you have 60% equity and 40% bonds. But what's happened in the last 5 years, bonds have not really delivered the return. And so what we're seeing is that in the equity investor, you're seeing an increase in equity and you're seeing a hedge on longer term bonds. And so people are questioning whether that model is broken. And we're seeing it express itself in the short interest of ETF. That caught our eye because that's a real, it is a countless number of individuals that actually
so
follow
they're betting
that strategy.
Against the long bond.
Yeah, they're saying rates will stay higher for longer. That's what they're saying. They're also saying that bonds have not delivered a return in a really long time. 60-40 doesn't do it for me. I've got to get more aggressive with equity, and I want to hedge a little bit, so I short the longer dated bond ETF. So that's the first thing. The second thing we started to look at, what makes our company unique is that it's the only data company in the world where you get both long and short data.
Yeah, that's true.
And
Absolutely.
so one of the things that we've noticed is that year over year, index funds have increased their exposure almost 25%. Active investors have increased about 20%. So hedge funds and people that trade, basically daily market participants. The short interest has gone up a lot too. So you have both sides of the ledger, both long, passive long, active long, and hedge funds that are shorting. Everybody's increasing their exposure. So risk is on. Risk is on. People, there's a little bit of a FOMO going on, saying, this market may be getting away from me. And we've seen this express itself in.
Now, why do you think it's that's, is it because the tax cuts are going to come through is there any macro reasons for this?
I think the market climbs a wall of worry, right? All we heard about in August and September and October is this is a bubble, it's going to crash. Meanwhile, look at the markets, rallied like crazy.
Yeah.
So, and the Mag 7 again rallied like crazy. So there is a fear that if you don't have exposure, you don't like it, but I can't trail by so much. I've got to go chase it. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing both sides, even the gross is higher, even though the net, you might be tight, but the size of the bets have become much bigger.
There's a momentum trade into equities, you're saying?
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting.
I would just say there's more conviction. People are afraid of missing out on what they see as a party.
Trump's approval ratings are not great, but the markets love them.
But I think when you do these polls, one of the really interesting demarcation questions should be, are you invested in the stock market or not?
Yeah.
Because I almost guarantee you, if anybody is invested, which is, a lot of people have 401k, but that's not, it's probably half the population, right? It would almost cleave, I would say, his popularity would be north of 50% with people that have equity exposure of some kind.
Yeah.
And would be south of 35 if you don't have credit. You don't have access, and you're not getting wealth generation. You feel left out.
Yeah, we have midterms coming up. I still think the Republicans are going to do better than the Democrats, than expectations. Because
why do you say that?
Because the Democratic Party is being defined by Zohar Mandavi right now and AOC, and lunatics who think.
So take us inside.
Supporting Nicolas Maduro, and I talk to a lot of people. Listen, we hang out on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Right?
Not exclusively, but most of the time.
A lot of times, yeah. Right? So we hang out in the belly of the beast of liberalism in many ways.
And capitalism.
Yeah, but it's
mostly liberal.
It's right. Liberal, but it's kind of like Bill Clinton-esque liberal. And they held their nose for so long with Biden. They stopped holding their nose with Harris because Biden was senile and Harris was, just a mess in so many ways, intellectually and sort of policy-wise. And now they're seeing their party heading towards Zohar Mandavi, who, quite frankly, is an imbecile. Besides being a communist.
I just have to say, and you can. Yeah, I don't know if you want to speak for your day job or not, but I got to imagine the people at the Post and at Fox News are having a field day right now. This has got to be such fun.
We are. It's like every day.
You got to be having a field day. No,
every
day they give you something.
Yeah, and Mandavi is like a dream in the sense for news because he's so bizarre. He literally has as his housing advocate a woman who said we're going to need to have to take private property away from people. And she said, white people. It was like, you just can't make this up. It's like Animal Farm on steroids, right?
Well, speaking of which, the Animal Farm is being redone. And it's being, I know you like Andy Kessler. I like Andy Kessler. I read his column.
I read his column. Yes, yeah. I read that. It was redone as not as a parable
Stalin,
against
Stalin,
Stalinism and, and communism, which it should be, but as a parable against, I don't know, big businessmen.
Yeah, basic capitalism.
I mean, it was stupid. And, it's that sort of cultural stuff that I think has a lot of like former Democrats annoyed and just like questioning, why are they here? And, why am I giving to a party that supports Zohran Mamdani and AOC and this Ilhan Omar from Minnesota.
But do you think he's learned from Trump? In other words, Trump is a master at, let me give you a catnip. He knows how to get people's goat and does it really well. But then over here, there's some really meaningful things going on.
Well, Trump comes through policy-wise. I mean, sometimes he says stuff and you're like, well, what does he mean?
Yeah, what does he mean? But actually, campaign promises, if you looked at it, is actually.
But a lot of this
he says something and actually does it.
But it's also performance art is sort of to keep people, Zohran Mamdani's a great guy. Remember he said he was a great guy?
Yeah.
And then he'll send ICE agents to New York in mass.
Right.
But Trump does deliver, capitalism, not far, not as libertarian conservatives I would like, but he does deliver this stuff,
right?
And it works. And Zohran Mamdani wants to deliver stuff that's insane, and and he points. If you look at Trump's appointments, I don't think you could say any of them are insane.
But Blackstone stock, I don't know if you saw this today. It was a breaking story. Blackstone stock's off like 8 or 9% today because he said private equity can't own any more single family.
Now, what's interesting about that, and I think we got just a few minutes left here, is that his best friend, one of his good friends, and a big contributor is Steve Schwartzman,
right,
of Blackstone. So I just wonder how that's sitting with Steve Schwartzman. Funny anecdote: I called up the people at BlackRock for another reason, and I had to talk to the PR person, and he said, "Oh, I'm so busy. This housing thing." I said, "Whoa, you keep calling me saying you're not involved in buying houses. That's Blackstone." He goes, "Yeah, but everybody gets us mixed up with Blackstone, so we have to work overtime to be telling people that it's Blackstone, not BlackRock."
So one last story on real estate, which is a good segue to Vanke. I love talking about this stock because Vanke is a real estate development in Shenzhen in China. Vanke. Yeah, the locals the locals call it wanker, and that's true. No, that's true. I'm not making that up, and I'm not offending anybody by saying it because that's how it's said and pronounced in Hong Kong. But I'm fascinated by, and we are fascinated by, this because this is the new Evergrande, right? It's the new real estate canary in a coal mine in China.
Well, Evergrande was a kind of
and needed public saving, and this stock basically, the government's given it some support. But what we've seen though is that the short interest remains, it's come off, but there's you cannot borrow much more stock. In other words, whatever the extent the market can be short, it is short this stock.
Oh, interesting.
Even at these levels.
Because of the government involved.
Because the government involved, and they know it's probably something.
Floor now.
Yeah. And so I think what Robert was talking about before, we didn't really talk about China at all, but it's a fascinating thing when you go to Venezuela, you're more or less giving the oil companies a green light to get more production online. And if you're not delivering that to other trading partners, which China is one, it has ramifications, and you're seeing it.
Although Trump did say that we're in the business of selling oil.
I hear you, but at what price and how much and when?
Yeah, I know. He wants to sell it. He wants us to pocket. I mean, that's what I love about America First. I mean, again, I'm very critical of Trump on some of his economic stuff. I'm glad they kind of like forgot about that whole check. Remember, they're going to give people checks from the
stimmies.
Yeah, I mean that's stupid because we've got a $2 trillion budget deficit. We shouldn't, and you're going to get and improve the job climate and improve the economic climate, which he's done in the big beautiful bill. There's all these incentives in there for production and capital improvements and stuff that employs people. deregulation. So I think that's the way at it. But so I am critical with some of the stuff he does, including tariffs, which I still don't like. He did back off a lot of them, including the tariff on pasta. You should know, because Italian pasta, I don't care what anybody says. You want to talk about homemade pasta, it's fine. You get real good Italian dry pasta. There's nothing better. The Italians eat it. They only eat homemade pasta like maybe once in a while, special occasions, but they love their dry pasta. He took that off because, all these tariffs are tax increases when you really come down to it. It's going to have some impact, but he does innovate and respond and adapt. So he backed off a lot of the tariffs. So he is in many ways, he's a rational player. This is not a crazy player.
Right.
And I think markets, if you kind of follow him, you kind of see it in motion. As crazy as he sounds sometimes on his Twitter page, and sometimes it's really nuts. But it's policy-wise, he's not nuts.
With that, we'll talk about next week why some of the poll numbers are low. Maybe it has something to do with healthcare.
Right.
We'll talk about that
I
next week.
want to get into next week a little bit of pot.
Well,
I'm going to call
self-care.
So I'm not going to do any pot, but I'm going to try to get on Marco Hodis, former high-profile hedge fund manager. I've known him for years, and now one of the leading advocates of Pot Inc. And not because he's a pothead, he had shoulder surgery. I remember when he had it, and he said the medical stuff worked. So I'm gonna call up Mark and try to get him on.
That will be a fun show.
That will be a fun show
because he's not afraid.
Oh no, that will be fireworks. We have to keep him in his cage a little bit. Anyway, thank you for tuning in for another riveting edition of Risk and Return. I'm Charlie Gasparino.
And I'm Bob Sloan.
With Bob Sloan, and see you next week.